Hello, my name is Ramira, and there's no problem at all in mentioning my name. Today, I am 32 years old, but this story happened when I was 21. And it's a rather sad story. Well, let's go. At that time, I was dating a guy named Leo. He was a very handsome guy, and I was aware that practically all the girls in the neighborhood wanted to be with him. But like this, I loved him very much, and he also loved me very much. And I knew that we were going to get married and that we would have a wonderful future ahead of us. However, that's not what happened, thanks to a love-binding spell. I decided to tell you this account so that it serves more as a warning to the people who follow you. To never, under any circumstances, do a love-binding spell. Once, Leo and I had a fight. And because of that fight, we ended up breaking up. We were separated for about 2 months. But then we got back together. However, during the time we were separated, Leo ended up being with someone else. And that other person was my cousin. When I found out, I was very upset. Upset because of Leo and because of my cousin too, who was indeed a very close person. And my cousin too. And she knew how much I loved him, and even so, she was with him. What I didn't know was that even before we dated, before this breakup, she was also completely in love with him. But only secretly. Here I will call this cousin of mine Anna. Anna was a very wicked person. And at that time, she frequented a terreiro, a place of worship in Afro-Brazilian religions. Well, I don't understand much about religions of African origin. So, I will be careful not to say anything wrong. But I know she frequented a terreiro. And well, she went and did a love-binding spell for Leo. They had already been together. So, from then on, she managed to do a love-binding spell. And she did this because she didn't imagine that we would get back together. Especially after I found out that they had been together. But I decided to forgive, because I loved him very much, and I had also been with other guys. What really hurt me was the fact that he had been with someone so close to me, and she, being close, had been with him, you know. But I loved him very much, so I ended up accepting and getting back together. But when we got back together, something was different. Leo became a very distant person. He was there with me, but you could tell that his thoughts were elsewhere. One day he called me to talk. And in that conversation, he said that he loved me very much, but that he couldn't stop thinking about Anna. That he, despite loving me too much, his thoughts were 100%, all the time, on her. And that hurt me a lot, because that's why he was breaking up with me, to be with her. And I was devastated, very bad indeed. I fell into a depression. One day, my mother, at the bus stop, waiting for the bus there as usual to return home, met a neighbor there, who lived about 3 houses away from ours. This neighbor asked how I was, and my mother explained that I wasn't very well, because of what had happened. My neighbor frequented the same terreiro as my cousin and told my mother what Anna had done. Because she knew who had done the binding spell, as the woman commented, "You know, oh, the cousin herself is trying to steal the other cousin's boyfriend." It was like a reason for gossip in the terreiro. And in that, she told my mother that she thought what Anna had done was wrong and that I needed to know about it. So that, if one day Leo, in this case, looked for me, I would have an open mind and heart that part of him was tied to Anna against his will, you know. But anyway, the love-binding spell, most of the time, is irreversible. And it's obvious that Leo never looked for me after that. But like this, even though he never looked for me, he still loved me. And he always told his mother that. That's why I know that, even tied to Anna, he still loved me. I only know that, in 6 months, he and Anna got married and went to live in a house about 3 streets away from where I lived at the time. Wow, that totally devastated me. Knowing that they were together and had gotten married, for me, that was like the end at that time. However, shortly after the wedding, Leo transformed into another person. He started drinking, using drugs, and being a totally violent person. I remember that one day I bumped into him at a small soccer field nearby, and I almost didn't recognize him. And thin, he had let his hair and beard grow. He didn't even look like that young and handsome guy he was before. I was astonished. And, at this point, I already knew about the love binding spell. But there was nothing I could do. So, when I saw him like that, I immediately associated it with the binding spell that Anna had done for him. And that it was probably consuming him entirely. And, just as the title of the account says, this story did not have a happy ending. Because one day, Leo arrived home very drunk. But he arrived armed that day. He approached where my cousin Anna was. And, from the way the body was found, she was in the kitchen making dinner. He shot her and then shot himself. The neighbors heard the shots and ran to see what had happened. They also heard Anna's screams, asking, for help and for him not to do it. But, immediately afterwards, the shots came, and they both passed away. Well, when the neighbors arrived there, they found that scene, the two bodies lying there on the kitchen floor. A lot of blood everywhere and a letter that was in Leo's pocket. In the letter, he said that he couldn't live in that hell anymore. He didn't like Anna. He didn't like being in the same room as her, but that somehow something tied him to her, and he couldn't separate. In the letter, he also said that his wedding, which was supposed to have been one of the most important days of his life, he didn't remember. He didn't remember why he asked her to marry him, didn't remember the day it happened, and also couldn't remember the wedding day. It was as if a big blackout had happened in his memory regarding those moments, and when he realized it, he was already married and living with her. And he saw no other way out than to do what he did. In the letter, he apologized to his mother, his father, and also to Anna's mother. On the day of the wake, I talked to his mother, and that's when I found out that he still talked about me a lot to his mother, to my ex-mother-in-law. And there, in that conversation, I told her about the binding spell, that I had already been warned that Anna had done a love binding spell for him. And I explained to her that in most of these cases, these bindings are irreversible and that there was nothing I could have done. His mother said that everything was okay, that now her son was at peace, had found the peace he so wanted, because he talked to her a lot about how he didn't like Anna and that he had no idea why he was with her. Well, that was my account. Unfortunately, Leo and Anna had terrible ends. And in this whole story, my real pity is for Leo, because he had nothing to do with it and nothing to do with her wickedness, you know. And sometimes I catch myself thinking if we would have stayed together, if we would have gotten married, and what our future would have been like. But then, as soon as I think about it, I feel a tension. It's a very great sadness, so I try to divert my thoughts regarding this subject. Well, that was my account. I hope you read it.